reference to the women's movement as life-affirming.
Yes.
And in part, and in about parts of women, I could agree. Unfortunately, as you yourself acknowledged in many newspaper reports over time, abortion has almost threatened to take over every other issue in the movement. How can a movement that says that some have no right to be born based on dependency, size, stage of development, disability, and I might remind you, some of your sisters say it's okay to have sex selection abortions, how can such a movement call itself life-affirming when the underlying principle is disaffirmed?
I think that
now we're about to get into the debate about abortion. Okay. Now, I've taught classes related to this subject matter, and there are deontological and utilitarian reasons that can be utilized in order to be an advocate of either pro-life or pro-choice. I'm not going to adumbrate those here, but just suffice it to say, this debate is still raging in this country. I mean, for some reason, it recedes for a while, but then it resurfaces. Okay. But I mean, all she's doing is pointing out the contradictions. The contradiction is you pretend to affirm the life of women and children. However, you are advocating for a medical procedure that terminates life. How can that be? Because that's the power of life and death put in every woman's hands. Now, that's just the facts. Now, I'm not here to argue one way or the other. I mean, it is what it is. However, it's all about consistency in act and speech. One can argue that the termination of life in and of itself is a form of violence. But, hey, let me keep pushing.
the right of women to choose to have children is enormously life affirmative.
And here's my response to that. There are a plethora of contraceptives in pharmacies and drugstores all throughout America, clinics, OBGYN offices. A woman or a young girl does not have to get pregnant. It's unnecessary. Now, using abortion as a form of birth control, there are some people who say that that's acceptable. But morally, how are you able to justify this consistently with your own ruminations about violence? How are you able to square the two? That's the issue at hand. Let me keep pushing.
It has moved motherhood
not for the child.
to a choice rather than a martyrdom. And it is enormous.
And let me say this here. Did you hear what she just said? That motherhood is either a choice or a martyrdom. Now, I don't know why anyone would consider motherhood to be martyrdom. The only way that it could potentially be perceived as such is in the context of being thwarted from being able to explore career opportunities. That's it. That's all this is about. I know for a fact that's all this is about. It's about how a child can prevent you from being able to climb the corporate ladder. That's what this is about. Okay? So let me continue to push.
Important. And if we had better sex education in our schools and not what we have now and the reactionary against it, I would hope that abortion wouldn't be necessary.
Okay,
I'm not for abortion. I am for the right to choose.
And Ariana Stashnopoulos. Mrs. Huffington. Brief question, please.
Betty, since sex education was introduced in schools and the distribution of condoms was made as available as it is now, abortions have gone dramatically up. So what kind of sex education do you have in mind? And you would consider the possibility of a sex education that includes the connection between sexuality and ethics and morality, and the connection also between sex and abstinence?
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know where your figures are, but again, United States, is not the best nation to look at for models here. We have very strange attitudes about sex in this country. We have a lot of conflicting, it's prudishness and so on and so forth. And in many European countries where they don't have such attitudes, where sex is a fact of life, they don't have all the problem of the teenage pregnancy.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Friedan.
Now here I would have to consult BGS because he's been doing a lot of study on this issue. But it seems as if this phenomena of single motherhood is expanding. This, it's bubbling. And I think that the conditions that give rise to it socially are the reason why you're seeing so much of it. I mean, and I think Walter Williams kind of commented on this, and I showed a video where he did, mention it, namely that the welfare state is basically paying women for slovenly behavior. Why not go out and have a kid when you know you're going to get supported for the kid? It's your ticket to at least some minimal form of support. I mean, that's just what it is. All right, let's keep pushing.
Helen Alvarez, your opportunity to make an opening statement.
Many women are waking up today in beds made with linen sold to them by the feminism of the 70s, and they are not warm and cozy. On the surface, women are seeing improvement in the respect accorded them in some cases, and we are grateful. But beneath the surface lies a disastrous notion of the nature of freedom that was a guiding premise for the women's movement, a notion that has infected even some of her healthier offspring. It envisions freedom as freedom from the other, not for. Freedom as willism, or the license to do anything, not freedom as the capacity to do the good.
So let me stop right here and just, kind of point out what she's making mention of here so I can break it down. So typically there's 3 different kinds of freedom that you'll find, discussed in the subject matter of philosophy, right? So on the one hand, you have negative liberty. And some people refer to this form of liberty as, rights. But it's freedom to not be interfered with in, the commission of actions or in the possession of beliefs. So the idea here is the government should not infringe upon your right to say what you want to say or to, use or consume products the way you want to consume them, or, prevent you from being able to practice the religions you want to practice. So it's freedom from the government primarily, but also freedom from other persons. Okay? But that's only one form of freedom that you'll find in the context of the subject matter of philosophy, because there's also the freedom of self-realization. Now, the freedom of self-realization primarily deals with trying to figure out who you really are and how to be, who you really are in a virtuous way. Who are you really? I mean, different thinkers from different time periods are going to have different things to say about this, concept of self-realization. But it is a form of freedom that I think is lost. And primarily that's because negative liberty has taken center stage. And negative liberty was espoused by people like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. You could put Rousseau in there, but not so much because he has a different articulation of the social contract and the state of nature than do Locke and Hobbes. But nevertheless, people sometimes call negative liberty the liberty of the moderns, as opposed to the liberty of the ancients, which is more closely aligned with the concepts of the freedom of self-realization and the freedom of self-perfection. Now, the freedom of self-perfection entails you becoming free the extent to which you're able to master a craft or to exhibit virtue or virtuosity in the context of some form of human activity that other people can look at and see the virtuosity on display. Like, for example, Michael Jordan playing basketball, listening to a group of musicians at a symphony play some of the most difficult pieces from Beethoven, or a pianist playing some of the most difficult pieces from Chopin, or to see somebody doing something that everybody cannot do. Tiger Woods playing golf, Dale Earnhardt, driving on the Indiana 500, Serena Williams playing tennis. So those are also conceptualizations of freedom that often don't get discussed within the context of the abortion debate and the context of feminism in general. Unless, of course, it has to do with money and careerism. Because I think that's the focal point of contemporary feminism. The idea is that women for too long have not had access to the same kind of powers and the same type of occupations as men, so therefore they feel like they are entitled to their just deserts. They want their just due in that domain. So anyway, that's just my digression. But let us push.
Freedom as if objective reality's natural law limits didn't exist. Exercising this freedom hurt women and the whole culture's commitment to the common good. The most disastrous effects were produced in the name of freedom of choice, legal abortion, the most prominent cause and greatest pitfall of 70s feminism. Its sad fallout are legion. It reaffirms the old sexist canard that women's biology is a disability one men don't have.
And that's important to understand, because the characterization of motherhood as some sort of martyrdom, boy, that says a lot about what people's values are today. The value system that we have is predicated upon the capital system in which we live, which success is pretty much equated with market-based activity and, matriculation and advancement throughout a profession. But this has not always been the case with humankind. But it is now. It's like life is a game and money is how you keep score. But hey, I digress. What do you do, or how do you respond to the charge that children are impediments to your economic success or to your professional success? And that the life of a professional is the summum bonum of all the kinds of lives that one can live. That's something to ponder. And it's something people often do not ponder. And the funny thing about it is, in the 60s, people, the young, in particular, were resisting against corporatism. And this is the funny thing, this wedding, this conjunction, this unholy alliance between feminism and corporatism. It's as if they both have the same view in mind. Now, explain to me if this is not, explain to me how this is not a myopic and a distorted articulation of what the good life actually is. Because at the end of the day, and this is just my own 2 cents that I'm putting in here, relationships are more important than anything else in this world. When you're on your deathbed, you might be remembered for the work you did in your profession. But most often people attain professions so that they can be members of a community and to start a family so that it can leave what it is that they have accumulated to someone and to develop a tradition that they can leave with someone, typically their progeny. But all of this, of course, is lost in, the kind of secular ambition that corporatism requires. And people, there are many philosophers who have critiqued, this whole, deification of corporatism. But I don't want to get into that here. I might do a show about that. But at the end of the day, it's great for businesses for this to be a model that people operate under because they're able to sell products to you. They're able to sell you goods or services or lifestyles. But, I digress. Let me keep pushing.
That the women's movement doesn't mean its central tenet. One need only be human to deserve human respect. It treats women and children as enemies, privatizes reproduction so as to invite irresponsible behavior toward women and children, stigmatizes the Project for Women as violent and oppressive. Since women are more pro-life than men, it chases many women from a unified women's movement. The abortion obsession leaves issues of most concern to women completely unaddressed, such as easing the balancing act between home and work. In conclusion, a woman's movement is necessary, but only one that promotes authentic freedom, which includes respect for life. 70s-style feminism did not.
Thank you very much. Don't go away. Camille Paglia.
I totally agree with you. I speak from the position of firm abortion advocacy, but I agree with you that that the media through again I speak as a libertarian, the media through its liberal bias has too emphasized the strains within feminism that insist on abortion rights, and that media has totally neglected any other voices which are pro-life. So again, let's not just blame the women's movement. Let's blame the cant, the conventionality of the media over 20 years.
At some point, some of the women's movement organizations have to take responsibility for what they're saying and some of their leaders. And I came tonight, let me just finish, with just a list of quotes from those...
Look, it's easy. See, all I see are these women deflecting and shifting responsibility to someone else other than themselves. Now, I like Camille Paglia. I'm not going to lie. Because I like, some of her critiques of feminism and her audacity at actually being able to, resist against some of the extremities related to it. But, here, she's on the team that is defending feminism and the women's movement as opposed to critiquing it. So, she's just doing a job in the context of this debate. However, where's the responsibility, man? But you can't hold people responsible if any critique related to anything they believe is considered to be injustice or oppression or domination or violence. Like, how long can this go on? I'm just waiting to see how long it's going to be conducted in the way that it is. I'm just ready to see. I'm waiting to see. But okay. Let me keep pushing.
Leaders of the women's movement, particularly NOW since its founding, which have said abortion is the sum and substance of what we are about. It's the core. The most prominent feminist book on this says that.
I think, of course, we have to go toward the issues which are under the greatest attack. Frankly, if the Catholic Church hadn't put $100 million into fighting against abortion, I wouldn't have to spend my lifetime in the courtroom defending rights that we won in 1973. I would be...
Betty Freidan, she and a number of women had gotten together and started the National Organization for Women. Again, they were fighting for equal opportunity for women in education and the workforce. It's very well documented that the abortion movement was originally a man's movement, an upper middle class white man's movement. But there was a man, and there were actually two men, who were fighting to get abortion legalized in America.
That's the mentality of the men. To be 21 Savage, 21. 20, those are the men, that's the mentality of the men who initially sold the idea of abortion to these women. Had to hit her raw, and then I made her take a plan B. You can't make it up, man. You really cannot make it up. But this is where we are. And if you try to tell people the truth about it and educate them about the sources of it, the only thing they'll refer to is negative liberty, choice, domination, oppression, violence, misogyny, and so on and so forth. But this idea was sold to these women by men. Who were the men? I mean, you saw pictures of the guys. But one of them was named Dr. Bernard Nathanson. Okay. And eventually he had a change of heart. Okay. And by his own admission, he was not a feminist. His commitment to legalizing abortion was only because he had a disgust for what some people commonly refer to as kitchen abortions. And he was a doctor, so he didn't want to see that. So on utilitarian grounds, he made an apology for abortion. Okay. Like if they're going to have it, they may as well have it in safe places. Okay. But his disgust at this practice actually morphed into activism when he met the other proponent of abortion by the name of Larry Lader. Now, Lader was a disciple of the renowned, the well-known founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. Okay? And Lader wasn't much of a feminist either. But he was dedicated to removing all the obstacles related to abortion because, and I'm talking about legal obstacles, social and moral, because he was convinced that you need abortion in order to solve the impending problem of overpopulation. So he was a Malthusian. For all of those people who have studied economics, he thought that there was going to be an overpopulation boom and that it needed to be adjusted. And of course, don't even begin to, bring to bear the subject matter of race and who is, for the most part, proselytized to demographically as the very persons who need to have more and more and more abortions. It's black women. Black women. So they're selling this, and they have successfully sold it to most women in this culture. I can't say most, but at least half of the women in this culture. And I know for a damn sure over half of the black women in this culture. Men, white men, who wanted to prevent either kitchen abortions or wanted to prevent a population boom, specifically, related to the population boom among the African American or ADOS or FBA population. Yeah, there's that. Okay? And that he thought later did that overpopulation was the reason, not women's rights, because he wrote a book about it called Breeding Ourselves to Death. You can't make this shit up. So I can't say Malthusianism is crackpot economics theory all across the board, but nobody takes Malthusianism seriously. Not really. But this is the basis upon which this notion that women need to include this or sweep this into their policy. This was not the case. It was these men that directed women to this. Two white men. And now if you even mention arguments against it, all of a sudden you become public enemy number one. How, Sway? How? How? How's that in and of itself something that is oppressive? But I'll wait for it. I ain't gonna wait too long because I'm gonna move on. Let me keep pushing.
Two men knew Betty Freidan very well, and they worked very hard to try to convince her to insert abortion in the women's movement's political Bill of Rights. The media were not in that room that night. That was a closed-door meeting. Then Betty Freidan, the next Monday, she has a press conference, and she tells them that she's speaking for all American women everywhere. And the Washington Post bought it. They headlined the abortion vote. They said essentially, all women want this. And that is how propaganda works. The feminists who bought into the abortion notion of my generation, well, think about it. They wanted to keep their jobs, but should women today, really in this climate, really have to choose between their job or their child? It's outrageous.